for joining us today. We've got a truly exciting session coming up. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speaker, Peter Stovall, a seasoned product leader, board member, and advisor with over 12 years of experience shaping product strategy and execution across a wide range of industries, from fast-moving startups to large-scale enterprises valued at over $2 billion. Peter has consistently helped teams transform complex challenges into clear, impactful roadmaps. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Brakely Bryant, and I'll be monitoring the session. I'm a consultant that works in sustainability and agro-food systems. Today's talk is called The Art of the Pivot, How to Navigate Transitions with Purpose for a More Rewarding Career, and is especially relevant for anyone who's exploring their next career move, whether you're shifting industries or diving into climate tech or simply looking to build a greater impact with intention in your work. So yeah, I hope you're ready for a thoughtful, inspiring conversation. And with that, Peter, I will hand it off to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brakely. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining, giving up your valuable time. Exciting to see a bunch of names, I think some that I recognize, which is really cool. So I will be talking about the art of the pivot. Pivot in this context is your career and your career path, professional path, although you can pivot in so many different ways. And we're going to be covering a couple of different things. So we're going to talk about Peter's pivots. So like why am I here, and like what do I actually have to talk about and share? And I'll share like the pretty big pivots that I've experienced so far in my career. And then I'll break them down into hard versus soft pivots and talk about like why it makes sense to change fewer elements at a time if it's possible. We'll talk about a customer discovery where you are the customer, and when and what to pivot. We'll talk about a superpower, so a really strong tactic for achieving your overall strategic pivot, which is networking. I'll share my own networking snippet. And if you don't have a networking snippet by now, then I think that's really the number one takeaway from this talk is go and write your networking snippet and get comfortable networking and sharing. Everyone does it. It's okay. So we'll get into that. And if you have questions, Brakely just shared, please drop them in the Q&A and we will pay some attention to those. There should be plenty of time for questions. Just before we kick off, I'd love to see, folks type in the chat, like, are you actively pivoting? What are you trying to pivot? Is it a role? Is it a location, an employer, industry? I'm assuming that most people are sort of actively pivoting into climate, and that's why you've joined, but would love to hear more detail. Alrighty. And I was just explaining to Kat that I didn't generate these images with AI. I went through the boneyard of Midjourney to get them. So this is a carbon efficient presentation. Okie doke. So bit of a serial pivoter, and it started really at university. So I pivoted from studying something called Anglo-Saxon, Norse, and Celtic, which is essentially ancient history. There's only one university in the world that offers it. That's Cambridge over in the UK. And basically because I'm Danish by background, I wanted to go and study Denmark's heyday and learn more about the Vikings. However, halfway through, I pivoted to a law major as I started to think about, getting a job out of university. And I had wanted to be a lawyer since I was 16. So pivoted to law. Fast forward 4 years, and at this point, I am a fully fledged corporate lawyer working on deals that are on the front page of the Financial Times at a Magic Circle firm called Freshfields, working with fantastic people, really interesting work. However, also on the side, founding a startup with some friends, trying to help amateur bakers deliver their surplus baked goods to hungry people across London, and starting to get a real appetite myself for tech and building products, falling in love with technology and that sensation of building software. So I started to explore that more. And the next big pivot for me was really from practicing law to productizing law. And you'll see on the right here the sort of the elements that I was changing with each of these pivots. So pivoting role from lawyer to product manager, and team from, antitrust, competition, and trade to product and innovation. With that pivot, though, I kept quite a few things constant. So kept the employer constant, and we'll talk about like how that can help you bridge the gap, is keeping elements constant as you change just one or maybe two elements. So with that, keeping the employer constant, I was able to just start feeling out and doing the job of product. I was able to leverage an established reputation. I was able to start as an SME because I was a lawyer and the customer was lawyers. So we'll talk about how that can ease pivots for you. Let's fast forward again. So in the next 5 years, I spent my time really cutting my teeth on product management, building products and product teams at international law firms. And the next big pivot was from the UK over to Canada and the US. And at this point, I love product management. I keep the role constant, but I change employer and I change location. Let's fast forward again. And the next thing that changed in my own career was I was able to align my personal values with company mission. And after some soul searching and customer discovery that I'll talk about, I was able to change industry from legal tech and compliance to climate tech, and joined Raptor Maps, where I currently am. So joined Raptor Maps 3 years ago. I am the director of product management. We are a fast-growing Series C SaaS company based out of the US, fully remote. And we help solar asset owners and operators operate really massive solar farms. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of panels in the middle of deserts, that kind of utility scale solar site. We help them operate much more efficiently using a combination of robotics, AI, and software. So definitely check us out, Raptor Maps. And if you are interested in roles, check out our careers page. We have a bunch of roles that are open. So that brings us up to date. I honestly don't know what the next pivot is. I'm sure I have many left in me. But that's a good overview of how I got here. Cool. Yeah, awesome to see the chat as well. So career pivots from tech to climate marketing for Kendall, and from finance project management into a more green aligned company or career path from Janelle, and Caitlin from big tech to sustainability. Okay, cool. We're going to talk about big tech as well, and potentially a new location. Very exciting. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, keep the chats coming. Okay, cool. A couple in marketing. Alrighty, let's talk about hard versus soft pivots. And so you see here these elements that I changed, mostly one or two at a time. And that's because the more elements that you change in a pivot, the harder it is. I was thinking long and hard about what sort of story to tell you, or what analogy. I got into a bit of an argument with my wife on the difference between a metaphor and an analogy. The one that I landed on is, imagine that you're trying to climb a ladder and someone keeps, adding weights to your rucksack. And each element that you're trying to change is another weight, and it just makes it a little bit harder to climb. Ask me later if you want to hear the other analogies. They were even worse than that one. But basically, the concept is that we have these elements that make up our current path or our current scenario. Broadly speaking, title, employer, role, industry, location, and team. This might seem obvious, but through my mentorship with Terra.do, I usually speak to someone from the community every Friday morning. And it surprises me just how much people are usually trying to bite off, which is great and cannot fault the ambition. My usual advice is try, if you can, a softer pivot to begin with and execute in stages. That's worked really well for me. So from practicing law to productizing law, which changed my role, and then from legal tech into climate tech. If I had tried at the time to go from being a full-on lawyer to a product manager in climate tech, that would have been a really, really challenging pivot. So just this general concept that the more elements you try to change, the harder that pivot is and the harder you'll have to work. And the more likely that opportunity is going to have to come almost exclusively from your network, because on paper, it will be very hard for you to position yourself and bridge the gaps that come from two or more elements effectively being missing. Hopefully that's nice and clear. I don't think it's a tricky concept, but it's very powerful. So let's look at a few worked examples. So leveraging constants. If you're able to maintain some elements through your pivot, especially employer, this can really help you. I like to talk about the concept of the emotional bank account. So when an employer knows you, you build a sense of trust over time. Hopefully, you're good at your job and you've built some relationships, you've built some trust. And so that emotional bank account looks pretty healthy. Over time, you pay into that emotional bank account with those relationships, with your good work, by, meeting deadlines with solid, high quality outcomes and regular investment, stable performance, just like a real bank account. That allows you over time to draw on that account. So let's say, for example, you need a day off at short notice. You're drawing against that line of credit. And in the same way, if there's an opportunity for you to pursue a stretch goal or even to try a secondment, like I did, I was able to start with a 3-month secondment to product. Then again, you're drawing on that bank account, and the assessment of you is much gentler than a recruiter's assessment of a CV, where it's really just that 2D image of you on paper. So if you're able to, and your employer is flexible enough and has the resources, and you can keep that constant, but change one other thing, perhaps it's role, location, or team. Probably unlikely that you can change industry and keep the employer consistent, although the bigger the company, especially horizontal offerings, horizontal SaaS offerings that serve like many different verticals, that could actually be an opportunity for you. We'll come back to this concept with stretch goals and the idea of doing the job before you actually formally get the job, which is another really powerful mindset. Cool. Just to round this out, a good example for me changing location, I moved from London to Washington, DC when I was with a law firm called Freshfields. It was super easy. Everything was handled for me. There was an apartment waiting for me. The flights were booked. My stuff was shipped. I just showed up, and hey presto, I lived in Washington, DC. Compare that to when I engineered my own move to Canada. It was very different. It was a little trickier. Cool. So another very powerful constant is your role. So if you are happy with the type of role that you're doing, so I saw a few folks in the chat are looking to pivot industry into climate, but maintain their role in marketing, right? That's another really good example where you're coming from a position of strength in terms of your expertise and your role, and you're looking to change the element of industry. And in that case, you're losing your emotional bank account with the employer. And so you're falling back on your experience, and you're going to have to work very hard to establish quick credit on the basis of your resume, your performance during your interview, and then referrals and references. So that all becomes a lot easier for you if you're keeping your role constant. And hopefully now you can start to see that if you're changing your role and your employer, moving away from that emotional bank account, things start to get harder. We'll come back to references later. Okay, so now let's make it really hard for ourselves and imagine that you are changing employer and role, and probably or potentially title and industry. So definitely not impossible, and folks are able to do it, again, especially through your network. But what can happen is that you start to give up leverage in order to make the pivot work. So because you don't necessarily fit the role on paper, because you're not able through your resume and experience to demonstrate that you have the full skill set, what you typically see is that people start to take a hit on title, or perhaps compensation, or perhaps don't quite get the industry that they're looking for. So whilst this is entirely possible, just be aware that you might end up losing some leverage and therefore taking perhaps a position of lower seniority or giving up ground in some other area. Again, that's totally fine if all you want is to get into climate, for example, and the title and other aspects don't matter. But we should do it knowingly. And then in terms of promotions and title changes, your happy path is that this is all swift and meritocratic in situ, your own current employer. But sometimes people feel they have to pivot or move in order to get that seniority bump. The best thing to do here, and this is in a book that I really value, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend, called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. The best thing you can do to get a promotion is to do a really good job. Luckily, the best thing you can do to execute a pivot is also to do a really good job. And so that gets trickier the longer you feel out of alignment with your mission, because the less motivated you are within your current role, the harder it is to do a really good job. And so that's why it's important also, we'll talk about this in the next section, to do your customer discovery, to check in with yourself and understand what is it that I feel is out of alignment? What is it that I feel I need to change? And am I at risk of no longer being able to do a really good job? Because that is your core currency at your current employer and also as you move. In part because of the strength of network, word of mouth, and references. The last thing that your new employer is going to do before they offer that contract or sign is reach back out to your previous managers, right? So it's so important to be able to consistently do a really good job. And that's hard, especially when you feel out of alignment. Okie doke. Just quickly check the Q&A. Brakely, you'll just interrupt me if there's a really hot question that you want me to answer.
Yep, of course I will. I'm monitoring it as you go along.
Awesome. Okay, so what to pivot? I'm a product manager. Do we have any other product folks on the call? I think I saw a couple friends. But this concept of customer discovery. So one of the sort of three pillars of product development: customer discovery, implementation, and go-to-market. Discovery is so key to understand the problem space that you're working in, the target customer, and that customer's needs and wants. So treat yourself as a customer here. And here are some really good questions that you can ask yourself. So what do I care about? And what do I hold as core values? Do I care most about having time with my family? Do I care most about having an equity stake and feeling like I'm a builder? About working in climate and being aligned with company mission? About working remotely and having full flexibility around my schedule and whereabouts? Start to ask that question, because once you understand your core values, it's a really powerful cheat sheet for planning the rest of your pivot and prioritizing efforts. And you can more easily assess alignment with between those core values and your current working situation. Really helpful for assessing whether you feel like you need to leave your current situation is looking at the path 5 to 10 years ahead. So what does it look like for folks who are more senior to me? For the people who leave, like, why do they leave? Where do they go? And what kind of person stays and why do they stay? When I was a lawyer, I just candidly, and this is more of a reflection on law at really big corporate firms. There are many different ways to practice law. I didn't want the work or lifestyle of the partners at those firms. I didn't think that there was enough work-life balance in that. And so I could see that very clearly where that path was leading did not align with my values, even before I really started to pivot into climate. So some good questions to ask yourself. Once you have that, you have a bit of a self-assessment, you've clarified your personal values. I was lucky enough to work with a career coach to uncover this. And so really I'm borrowing from the path that she took me on, and she was fantastic. And if you have the opportunity to work with a coach, I highly recommend it. Can be formal, can be more of an informal mentor, can be a manager if you're lucky. And try and put yourself out 5-10 years and visualize what that looks like for you. You know, are you living in a remote cabin halfway up the mountainside like I want to be? Are you, downtown in person in an office solving smart grid issues? Like, just try and visualize that. That was really powerful for me. The second piece is knowing your gaps. So understanding, like, where are your current real and perceived gaps. I say real because real, there are sort of hard skill sets that you might be lacking. Perceived is more about like branding, and we'll talk about that on the next slide. Perceived is more about like how you've articulated your experience to date. What words do you use in your CV? What terminology? What does your online profile look like? And in that sense, the way that you've presented yourself as a brand, where are the gaps? And then you have to fill those gaps. So a very helpful tactic I found in addressing those gaps and filling them is look at job descriptions of your dream jobs. So let's say you want to be a sustainability manager at Google. Go and pull the job description and have a look at what they feel is super valuable for the role, and highlight the pieces that you don't feel you currently have, both from a hard skill set perspective, and then also from a sort of positioning in terms of how you've positioned your own skill set. And in terms of priority, focus on the hard or technical skills first, because they take longest to bridge. You know, you might need to do a 6-month course. You might need to do a degree. I found that most of these pivots do not require a degree, just to be clear. But, you know, if you want to go and be a neuroscientist, then you're probably going to have to go and study. Cool. You will also likely find that you have a gap in your network. You're all part of Terra.do and you're here, right? So I'm assuming you're building a growing community within climate. And so you're already well on your way with that step. Next question you have for yourself is, how do I present? And pulling that job description or multiple job descriptions will help a little bit here. You want to use the language of your future role. So describing your own, it's actually wild how different 2 versions of your CV can look. Absolutely wild. And I've helped, I think this is a legitimate use of Gen AI. It's something that a Google search can't do. And I know we're all very climate conscious because we're here and we try not to overuse Gen AI, but this is legitimately a very good use of it. If you upload your CV and you upload a job description and you ask for recommendations on how to present that same information, but tailored to that CV, and maybe some of you are already doing this, it's actually wild how different that same experience can be positioned, and how much of a difference that makes in terms of catching the eye of recruiters. And I think leveraging the community, we'll talk about that. And if you can, not everyone's comfortable doing this, but engage with the community and start to write, start to comment. So for me, what this looked like was, as I started learning more about climate and climate tech, I started to try and apply it to my own job as a product manager. And I realized there wasn't a ton of information out there on how you build software products more sustainably. And so I started writing and pulling together some piecemeal information. I wrote a series of articles on how to build climate positive software products. It got me a ton of interaction with the community. It meant that actually, as I started interviewing, hiring managers had seen those articles. And before all of a sudden, I had sort of rebranded as that positive, that climate positive product guy, which was unintentional, but very powerful. So if you feel comfortable writing, commenting, interacting with the community that you're trying to engage with. So let's say it's climate marketing. Are there groups on LinkedIn, groups in Slack? Can you start posting content on marketing and climate more regularly? It's very powerful. I would say at the moment, with the proliferation of AI generated content on social media, especially LinkedIn, the value here has slightly diluted, but it's still valuable as folks go and check out your LinkedIn, your website. If you can find the time, especially for product design, those potentially marketing, but those career paths where you can actually have output that people can check, it's really valuable to have a website or a portfolio. Software development, for example, like folks will want to go and check out your GitHub repo. So another thing I did was put a website together, peterstovall.ca. Check it out. Let me know your comments. It needs a bit of a refresh. So, but that's also something I did to try and help bridge the gap in terms of how I rebranded and presented myself. So ultimately, you want a bit of a holistic online presence that fits all the aspects of the pivot you're trying to make. Okay, this next piece is really powerful because you don't need to land a job for this. You can do this in situ. So one of my favorite movies, The Matrix, there is no spoon. Slightly different. You kind of have to be the spoon here. You have to be the job before you formally get it. So a really powerful stretch goal here is just start doing the job. I've done this twice, and it's basically meant that I got the job without applying. So when I was practicing as a lawyer, I started building software, both outside of work with friends for an angel seeded startup, and then also at work by building little Excel macros that were pretty terrible, but gave me some exposure to what it was like to start solving client problems with actual software. So think about like where you currently are and what you can do to start bringing in aspects of that dream role that you might otherwise formally apply for. So let's say, for example, you are working in marketing in big tech and you want to pivot to climate. There may be opportunities for you to start or join an internal task force for climate. I was part of the founding team for a carbon accounting task force at my previous law firm. And so I started to understand and get to grips with carbon accounting. Wasn't part of my role, but I made it part of my role, and then it became part of my experience. So very powerful to start to stretch into the role that you want in situ. So task forces are a great way to do that. Also, teaching and sharing internally. So at Raptor Maps, we have lunch and learns. It's a great opportunity to learn something and then share it with your peers. And then all of a sudden you start to become known for that type of content, and opportunities can come knocking. You can do this inside as well as outside of work. So inside work can be nice because there are only so many hours in a day, and the more you pile on outside of work, the more tired you'll be, and the more the risk of burnout. You do really have to look after yourself with pivots. Pivots are hard work, and you have to look after yourself. Build in breaks as well. Give yourself time in between interviews and processes. It's a roller coaster. So outside of work, I joined hackathons. I offered my expertise for free, meeting with founders and leveraging the skill sets I had. At the time, it was law. Later on, it was product. And I still do that. I meet with founders for free. We go for coffees, and it's so fulfilling, and it's also rewarding. We'll talk about this in a second with networking, but you need to have that mindset of delayed gratification with networking and not expect some kind of reward immediately. The reward may come, 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road. Okie doke. Some tips for actually pivoting into the industry of, well, clean energy specifically, but you can apply this to climate tech more broadly. So I think it's really tempting when you're looking at pivoting into climate tech and specifically clean energy to just look at the shiny companies that are in the news. So if it's tech, then TechCrunch, who's raised a huge Series C or Series D, who has the sexiest headlines. And that's where most people's applications will go. Thankfully, the landscape is actually much broader than that. So if we look at energy, yes, you have the startups that just raised big rounds, but you also have a much bigger landscape of independent power providers, IPPs, utilities, original equipment manufacturers or OEMs, all of those companies that manufacture solar panels, trackers, inverters, combiners, wires. You have the grid operators, otherwise known as the ISOs or RTOs, who are trying to implement smart grid technology. All of those companies are trying really hard to digitize, and they're at different stages. So if you broaden the lens to include them and not just the startups in TechCrunch, suddenly your field of play becomes much wider. And I think you can apply that logic to really any vertical within climate. For those folks who like to work on software like me, it's really become the case that hardware is software, or digital is physical, physical is digital. You'd be hard pressed these days to find hardware that doesn't have some element of software component. And that's particularly true for B2B. A good example is inverters. So inverters, big piece of equipment on a solar farm. It converts electricity generated by the panels in DC to an AC current. And there's a massive software component to that, even though you might think of it as hardware, all the sensors and operating system. So again, you can look at hardware companies even as a software product manager, because they'll likely have some software element to them. Also, and this might be a little bit controversial, so hold on to your hats, you can consider incumbents. So folks who are in the market and maybe less attractive, like electricity generators who have some fossil fuel element to their fleet. Some of them are working really hard, unfortunately harder than others, to adapt. Good example would be the Danish company Dong Energy that rebranded to Ørsted a number of years back. Basically jettisoned their entire fossil portfolio and switched over to wind and solar. And that would have been a really good time to join. Still a good time to join. BP recently acquired LightSource, so that has an entirely renewable fleet. And again, you have to be a bit more discerning to see, you know, what is real appetite to innovate and what is marketing. However, if you can do that, again, that broadens the lens. And coming back to that first piece, you want to pivot one element at a time. So if you can get into the industry, congrats, you've pivoted that one element. It gets easier for you to go from there. Big tech as well. So a lot of the larger tech companies, Google, Apple, Microsoft, GitHub, and Meta, they have some aspects of sustainability internally. Again, you have to look at each company, do your research, like how big is their budget? Have they had recent layoffs to that team? How resilient are they in the current political climate? Of course, you have to look at all of those factors. But again, it broadens the lens if you include them in your search. Also, just generally, there are some things that traditionally haven't been considered climate, but are now being pulled into the lens. As a society, we need to weather climate change more broadly. So supply chain management, for example, regular B2B logistics and supply chain companies that previously would not have been considered climate tech at all are now climate tech, because managing supply chains in the face of more extreme weather is effectively a big part of climate resilience. So the last point here is obviously do your homework. I mentioned it before. It's a very good time to look at business models that are weathering really the perfect storm right now. A hostile political environment in the US, supply chain uncertainty with, you know, tariffs and unfortunately a return to nationalism globally, and high interest rates still. It's a very good time to look at the companies that are actually still growing and have solid product market fit and financials. Okie doke. Let me just check, see if there are any questions.
There is one question about posting content. I don't know if you want to leave that till the end or dive into it right now.
What is the question?
Let's see. So Nicholas asked a question about posting content. I agree this is an amazing way to get visibility, but what about credibility when you don't have the experience in it yet? I have many climate topics in mind I'm quite passionate about, but feels like an imposter to write about them as I don't have the work experience in it yet.
Yeah, that's such a good question. If you are confident in your research and that what you write is objectively accurate and you can refer back to solid sources, that is more than enough. You know, you don't need to have like particular qualification in that area, but if you have confidence that what you write is objectively accurate and you can hedge yourself by referring to a good source or multiple sources, post it, and just build up that muscle. It feels awkward. It definitely feels awkward, especially if you're not the type to like toot your own horn or enjoy the limelight. And I would also say don't get discouraged by not getting many like interactions or likes. Unfortunately, these algorithms, the LinkedIn algorithm, they work if you post regularly and they punish you if you don't. But it's also just a really good muscle. So I often say that, and I forget whose quote this is, but the best way to learn is to try to teach. And so just by virtue of you writing that comment and distilling your learning into something shareable, you'll have done what's called a double loop learning, and you'll have absorbed it better yourself and be able to talk about it better yourself. So I would say try and ride out that imposter syndrome. And even if no one engages with it, you'll reap the benefits just by having distilled it into something bite-sized.
And there's a follow-up there too, which asks, re-volunteering, how do you approach founders to offer your services?
Yeah, so networking. That's a very good segue into networking. That's where I've had most of these opportunities. and then community engagement. So one founder I met at a climate protest in Vancouver, and we just got chatting, found out a bit of context, and then I offered to meet for coffee and listen to more of her roadmap. But so mainly networking through various forms, which we'll jump into now. So networking deep dive. Again, I think if you take away one thing from this, okay, two things, it will be the power of the stretch goal of making your current job a climate job. I believe in what Project Drawdown says, that every job is a climate job. The situation is such that we can't afford not to think that way. So why not make it more of a climate job? And then the second thing is just how important and essential networking is. Also, if you didn't grow up with, parents who networked, maybe you're the first to go to university, networking it can be a really strong head start for people who inherit this from role models. And so if you didn't, it's important to learn this as an adult. And it has compounding interest. So the earlier you start, the more people you meet, the more it compounds and other people refer back to you. This talk is a great example. I did the Terra.do climate fellowship. I met Kat. We were in the same cohort, and between Kat and me since then, lots of different conversations and introductions. Just one example, just one node in our network. Okay, if you've seen the movie Let Me Help You, this is a bit of an inverse where it's more like let others help you. So, and do I really have to? Networking is awkward. Do I have to reach out to people and expose myself and say, hey, this is me? It is awkward. There are two reasons why you have to do it. One, these statistics. So you're 44% more likely to get hired for a job if someone refers you in. That's massive. Also, 76% of jobs don't get advertised. It's called the hidden job market, and they get closed through word of mouth. If you're not networking, you are not benefiting, you're not tapping into these stats here. So yes, you really do have to. And the second reason is that it's totally normal and expected. Everyone, you find that everyone does it. So once you kind of break the ice on it, you realize that it's totally normal to get a networking request. It's nothing out of the blue or ordinary. It's a routine experience. So you just need to get used to it. And I talked about that mindset. So not having that mindset of needing to convert something by the end of the call, and that really frees you up. Okay, so focus on strong second connections. Can you see down bottom right here? This is a screenshot of LinkedIn where you can filter by first and second connections. Let's say I'm just going to pick on some people in the call. So let's say that Kendall, let's say I'm really good friends with you, and you're really good friends with Preeti. If I go straight, but I don't know Preeti. If I go straight to Preeti and say, hi, Preeti, my name's Peter, and this is the experience I have. I'm really interested in your company. Would you be open to a chat? That's a much weaker outreach than if I go to Kendall and say, hey, Kendall, we're friends, you know me, I know you. I see that you know Preeti. Would you be up for connecting me to Preeti? Here's a paragraph I can share for the connection. And then Kendall reaches out to Preeti and says, hey, Preeti, my old pal. I know this person, Peter. I can vouch for him. Solid guy. Here's some more experience. Would you be open to me connecting you? All of a sudden there, I've been able to simulate a first level connection with Preeti through Kendall. Really, really powerful stuff, because you're essentially leveraging someone else's emotional bank account with the contact you want to meet. So when you search for companies that you are interested in, look for second order connections and leverage your first connections to get there. Simple, but very, very powerful. Much easier than a cold outreach. Focus your networking and keep track. So I have a Notion database where I track companies of interest. I use it also as a CRM. So I track all of the different people that are in my network, and I update notes. So that helps to stay on top of it. Provide an easy out. So if you are sending an email, say, no worries if you don't have enough time. I just find it's nice to give an out in case people aren't interested. There's this lovely saying in the VC world of ask for advice, get money. Ask for money, get advice. So an example here would be, don't write an email saying, hey, can I have a job? But instead write something like, hey, I saw that you have experience in product-led growth, and it's something I'm interested in building as a skill set. Would you have 10 minutes to discuss? So try and think more about asking for advice than the specifics of a particular opportunity to some extent. And then I talked about not having a must convert mindset, which makes the call just so much more comfortable. And if nothing comes from it, that's absolutely fine. That person knowing you and having had a chat might make it easier for you to reach out in the future, which is a real plus. And the payback may be delayed. Okay, I'm going to share with you my networking snippet just to demonstrate that this is not awkward. It shouldn't be embarrassing. If I had shared this with you 3 years ago, I would have been mortified because I was just getting used to networking and it felt awkward. Now I'm going to share it with you just to demonstrate that it's not a big deal. So here's my networking snippet. I highly recommend putting this together. 1 paragraph max. In fact, this is probably a bit long. It's getting a bit long. I should probably prune it back a bit. But this should be ready to go. You can send it to any of your first contacts. And the goal is that it's super easy for them just to forward and copy you into an email. And so you make it really easy for people to introduce you. As a product manager, you'll recognize you're reducing the friction there for the user experience of connecting you to other people. So I highlight a couple of things in here. I highlight the kind of key area of my experience domains. So, and then the types of companies, specifically high growth SaaS startups. A lot of startups will want to know that you're adaptable and can operate in a fast moving environment. And I have experience, like, from a product perspective, supporting fundraising. But then I've also worked at these larger companies. So in case people want to know that as companies scale and product scales, I can also handle scale. And then, I'm for real about climate. I dedicate a lot of my spare time, in quotations, to our work at Climate Product Leaders. If you haven't checked us out, please do. Climate Product Leaders, our mission is to help activate the product community through awareness of climate conscious product development. And then a link to your LinkedIn, and hopefully by this time your portfolio that you'll have set up after this talk. Alrighty, I just want to touch on one last thing, and that is beware network attrition. It's good to know this going in. Let's say that you are, I think I saw someone who's in biotech. So let's say that you're in biotech and you want to jump over to climate tech. You have all these amazing contacts in biotech and you've nurtured that community for years. Unfortunately, they're going to feel less connected to your content and just potentially you once you leave biotech and join climate tech. Pivots decay your network, especially when you change location, industry, and career path. There's a horrible dilemma here that at the same time, networks are one of the biggest accelerators to your successful pivots. You can alienate and leave behind the very people who've helped you. So the solution here is just be very aware of that, so that you can counter it. Someone very kindly, warned me of this early on as I was moving away from law. And so the really cool thing here is this can actually be a niche angle for you. Like for me, what connects law and climate tech? I'm uniquely positioned to comment on that as a lawyer who has pivoted. So then in that example, what uniquely connects biotech and climate, right? Like what gives you a unique insight in there that you can maintain with your network? So I just want to like flag that so that you can actively work against that power and maintain your original network. Cool, quick recap. So we talked about making things easy for you with softer pivots, ideally softer sequential pivots. Change one element at a time. If you need to change 3 elements, that might look like 2 or maybe even 3 pivots. And the reason for doing that is largely to avoid losing leverage. So to avoid giving up too much in one big pivot where you lose leverage. Start doing the job. Every job is a climate job. And wherever you are right now, see what you can do to formally or informally reframe your job description. Could be task forces, could be side hustles, volunteering, hackathons, but just start calling yourself that role. Start imagining that you're already doing it and manifest it. Leverage constants. So look for opportunities within your employment, within your industry, within your location, and know your gaps. So read those job descriptions to reverse engineer your own. Plug in hard skills as well as soft skills. Unlikely at this stage that you need to plug many soft skills, but then also think about repositioning yourself. Talked a bit about personal branding. We had a great question about whether you feel justified to write and imposter syndrome. I absolutely encourage you to write as long as you've done your due diligence and you think it's objectively accurate. Go for it. Fill that out with a portfolio if it's relevant for your career path, and write about yourself in the language that your employers will understand and look for. Leverage your network. So ask people you know to connect you to people you don't. It's that simple. Ask people you know to connect you to people you don't. That networking tool is incredibly powerful, and it's a living paragraph. You'll want to hone it all the time. And you might want to adjust it as well. You definitely will want to adjust it based on who you're sending it to. I should have mentioned that. Build the network before you need it and maintain the network you leave behind. And then prioritize trade-offs to look after yourself and know that it is a roller coaster and pivots are hard. Even the soft pivots are hard, let's be honest. So look after yourself and keep up that customer discovery. And then rinse and repeat, right? Because the network, it's an evolving asset that you want to maintain all the time. I meet at least one person a week through my network. And I will stop there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Peter. This was really, as someone that's gone through a career pivot from software sales into ag tech, I wish I had known some of these things beforehand. So really, really inspiring talk. Thank you. The Q&A doesn't have any questions in it as of now. Feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself. If you have a question, we have, 3 minutes to the top of the hour, but happy to stay a little bit after too. Give a moment to see if anyone pops up. Yeah.
All good.
All
And
right.
feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and connect and treat us as your community.
Awesome. Any last tips on how to use TerraDo or leverage the network in Slack to help with these pivots that I guess you haven't already mentioned? Maybe you got them all.
Yeah, Terra.do has been fantastic. Like the amount of folks I've met through Slack and through the mentorship program. So definitely leverage mentors. If you're still in the fellowship or if you have access to mentorships, I think it's 5 people that you just can automatically speak to, which is huge. That was massive for me. And it makes it like a 1.5 contact. So I talked about the importance of reaching out to people you know in order to connect with people you don't. When you have terror in common, it's almost like a kind of 1.5 contact, it's like you have that in common, and therefore people they'll extend you a little bit more of that trust than if you don't have that in common.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely use that resource. I know it was helpful to myself as well. Let's see, Kat is also posting the Open Door Climate connection site, so definitely use that as well. Kat, any last words that you want to add in here?
No, all good. Great presentation, Peter. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.